Well, I am super excited to be here, and I hope you guys are as excited as I am to be giving this talk. So just to see how excited you guys are, I'm going to say this side, and I want you guys to yell as loud as you can, okay? It's a competition. So now it's this side. I think it evens it out. Do I do the purple shirts? Do I do the purple shirts? How excited? How excited are the purple shirt pro people? All right, so thank you. Going to talk a little bit about my company just so you have context, because I'm sure, as Matt said, that probably not everyone has heard about Vanguard. Vanguard is a mutual fund company. I love working for this company, and the reason for that is because of its purpose. We take a stand for all investors. We don't have any private owners. We don't earn money for anybody else. Every profit that we make is for our investors. We give everything that we can back to the clients so that their money continue to grow and they have a bright, secured future. Just to give you some context on how large of a company it is, so as Matt said, it is like a campus. When you come to our company, it's a little city that you come to. It was founded in 1975. We have close to $5 trillion almost at this point under asset. We're a global company, so we have investors across the world. We have 14,000 plus crew. Crew is our employees, so that's how many people work at Vanguard, and in IT, it's about over 2,000 people. So when we're talking about transformation, that's what we're talking about. And IT makes our business. Why is that? We're a virtual company. You can't walk into Vanguard. There's no branch office. There's no human interaction. Everything that we do with our clients is through our web, through our mobile apps, through phone associates. So as you can see here, we have close to 370,000 logons per day, 10 million phone calls, 1.4 trillion emails, and 30 to 60,000 transactions that are going through our online. So it's a pretty critical business that we run through our web presence. And our IT team, it's, as I said, over 2,000 IT professionals with about 200 plus Agile teams. So the magnitude of change we're talking about is transforming how we do software development across those 200 teams and 2,000 engineers. And because it's critical, everything we do and every change that we made had to be very deliberate and very thought through. So now before I talk about the journey, I wanted to share a story. I was a Scrum Master maybe 6-7 years ago, and I was on a project. This is before we did the whole shift left and test transformation. And we were working on probably one of the most critical brokerage transaction calculation there was. And it was massive, it was complicated, and as Liz said, somebody did the estimate and somebody committed us to a delivery. So we were on the go. There was no question, there was too much work to do and not enough time. So all this time, my testers, they're using, Agile process, continue to build this calculation and test. And by the time we get to the end, we probably had over 1,000 test cases. And then we're probably 2 weeks of our final regression testing is when our product owner, our business, decides that, hey, let me take a look at this system. And so she plays with the system and says that one of the brokerage calculation is incorrect. We're forgetting one of the trade type to include it in our calculation. And now making a change at this point was just impossible because the formula itself was complicated. Not only that, we were working with a monolithic application, which means everything is tangled, everything is tied to each other. So when we make a change, the blast radius of that impact is huge. So there was no way we could make this change. But our product owner said, well, we can't go live with this change. Because as I said, all our transactions go through our online, and we can't afford that cost of having a calculation error. So what do? We made the change. We made the change, and we scrambled like crazy to test. And we still couldn't get through all of the testing in time, but we did the best we could, and we pushed the product out to production. That was probably the moment as a Scrum Master I realized we're doing something wrong here. This is not right. The fact that any change we want to make, we're not confident, we have lots of stress and anxiety, and there's way too much testing to ever, no human can ever get all of this testing done and make sure and get that confidence. So I hope that gives you a context of where we were and then where we wanted to be. So how do we start this journey? We said, well, in order to actually transform how we test and how we do development, we have to make sure we all understand the problem first. So what was our problem? I call them opportunities. So opportunity number one, throw over the wall, right? We had silos. Our developers were the superior class almost. They felt like all they could do was code all day and then throw things over the wall to somebody else to figure out if it's working right. It's their problem. There's a production defect. Tester, right? Why didn't you catch this? I was a developer too, and I too sat on the other side of the wall one day. So I do know the mentality of that. Opportunity two, because we are a financial company and we have systems that are very old, very legacy, we used to follow waterfall. We had tons and tons of documentation, and even though we moved to Agile 10 years ago, we continue to document everything. Everything had to be documented. We're regulatory, we have financial restrictions, we have to make sure everything we do is documented. So we used traditional requirements practices of documenting everything in long process like use case and reg spec. Those documents that get archived forever because it required us to archive it for 7 years, but nobody ever looked at it, right? Does that sound familiar to anyone? Raise your hand if you've been there as a developer and you've never read one line of requirements, right? Me too. I was like, I am not reading that. I know what the story wants, I'm going to go code it. Opportunity three is the safety net. So what this means is all these projects, so all these 200 Agile teams are building things in their own components, right? So they're all working on different areas of the features. At some point, it all comes together, right, which we called integration. And then there is a team that's responsible to run a regression test across that entire application to make sure that nothing is broken. Well, it was a safety net because all teams said, well, there is someone at the end that's going to run all of the tests to make sure that I didn't break anything. And if I did, they'll let me know. And this is probably my favorite, business priority. So this is a typical IT person's problem. I have way too many features, way too many projects. I'm freaking out. We've already committed. I don't know how I'm going to get all this done. The experts say do the ones that feel most complicated and unpleasant because then you feel like you've accomplished something. You've taken control over the situation. Well, I still have too many projects, and now I just feel like I'm doing them in the wrong order, right? So this is how I felt too, and this is how my team felt. Like, we're doing all these features, do they ever actually get used? Our business came to IT and said, we have to get all of these features done in this time. Whenever we went through that Agile process of defining must-have, could-have, would-have, should-have, it was like everything is a must-have. Like, we're a finance company, we need all of this stuff, right? So everything had to be done. Somebody did the estimation, so we're already committed to an end date, and now all you gotta do is get it done, right? So we made sure that we all clearly understood what the problem was, because then only can we start peeling at it and start solving it. So this is me, because I was told to solve this problem, to say we need to do this because we had a dream, and our dream was to get to continuous delivery. So go conquer this challenge, go figure this out, and make it happen across the enterprise, across all of IT. So I took the bottom-up approach first because I knew that at the end of the day, the people that actually have to do the work are the developers. Why is that? Because this is really not about changing testing. It's changing about how we do development. We have got to be involved as developers in conversations so that we understand that we're building the right thing. Then we have to follow test-driven development or closely enough, even if you can't do test first, close enough that you're doing automation tests to validate your code as you're developing so that you're building it the right way. So build the right thing in the right way. And I got to get developers excited about this. So how do we do that? Well, one thing we said was, as developers, you do have this little bit of a pride. You have pride in your code. You want to make sure it's the best thing. And at Vanguard, we're a mutual fund company, so a lot of our developers looked up to the Googles and the Amazons and the Facebooks, right? So they're the extreme developers. So we brought that perspective in. We said, look, this is what they're doing. You want to be that? You've got to start doing this. You've got to gain that confidence. You've got to have pride in your code that no one can ever find bugs in it. And the easiest way to do is to write more code, which are called tests, automated tests. You already know how to write code. This is just another type of code to validate your test, right? So we got them excited. We gave them this pride kind of a thing. And developers that knew this, and we did this very small, right? So we didn't do it across all of the 2,000. We started with, we found people that were the give it a try kind of people. They'll try to anything new. And we got them excited about development and coding together, and not just thinking about testing as a separate thing, development as a separate thing. But I could only go so far with this grassroots movement because we're talking about an enterprise. I can't do grassroots movements in silos and make this transformation enterprise-wide across 2,000 engineers. At some point, I need some money. I need some investment. So that's when we took a top-down approach, right? Where we got leadership to buy into this, where we got them to invest into this program, where we were able to bring Matt and all of the instructors and coach onto our company and do training and coaching and feature file workshops so that all of these people had a support system. So how do we get leadership to change their mindset? Well, remember, I told you they did have a dream. They had a vision of getting to continuous delivery. So the one thing we made it very clear is that dream of your continuous delivery is impossible without transforming how you test and develop your software. You have got to achieve continuous testing. Otherwise, you'll get things out faster maybe, but you'll be in the newspaper soon. So you want to get things out fast and be proud about it, right? So that was one of the things that really worked with the leadership team to help them see why this change is so important. And this was a tough battle because we're a very delivery-focused IT team. Everything is delivery. You got rewarded for delivery. Nobody rewarded you for slowing down and thinking about what you're building. So getting them on board was probably a tough challenge. But they bought into it, they funded the program, and we were able to then take it further. So then, as I said, we started in pockets. We had a few teams that piloted this concept of applying BDD, of applying TDD, increasing test automation, getting the entire team to own quality. So we really said everyone owns quality, which means if your team produces lots and lots of manual tests, it's not going to be the QA person doing all the tests. All of you are going to be doing the test, right? So developers, designers, Scrum Master, everyone's involved. So get it right. Do it right so it makes all of your life easier. And once they did that, we celebrated. We saw their testing cycle went down. Their defects went down, and we took measurements before they started and after they did this transformation. So the baseline numbers and the new numbers changed dramatically. I mean, some teams, it took them weeks to do regression cycle. It went to hours. Their defect counts went into single digits, right? So we saw change, we celebrated, we brought a lot of attention to them, gave a lot of accolades from the upper management, which also helped upper management gain confidence that this can work, right? So small wins, and then we propagated the message. Well, when I started propagating, I didn't realize that it was going to catch like a wildfire, but it did. In fact, way too many teams were interested now, and way too many people wanted to get training. And that's when we really put a demand on Cucumber to continuously fly to US and give us that training. So we also created a lot of centralized process and a lot of centralized automation framework. We formed a team under me that was called the Automation Engineers, and they were focused on building enterprise frameworks to remove friction, so not every team had to figure things out. We would do it for them. And so we gave this really 5-step, get everyone on board, give it a try, get their mindset changed on why this is important. Collaboration, I think that we just talked about how important including every discipline into the collaboration process. Define your test strategy. So when you're talking about automation, don't just think about testing from the UI, which is where we usually tend to think about testing, but think about the unit level testing, the integration testing, and make sure all of that is incorporated into your process. And then we started thinking about the team practices, right? So as I said, it's not about one person testing on the team, it's everyone's responsibility, everyone owns quality. And eventually we even started to redefine roles. So we had testers who all what they were doing was manual testing, right? So we needed to evolve their skill set so they could understand the automated tests. They could help review them. They could sit with a developer and do pair programming or review of the test to make sure things are covered that they really believe are critical to this functionality. So we introduced automation engineer and a product test engineer, which are 2 new roles at our company to help people move into this automation. And then this is the tools and support. So Testing Center of Excellence, which is the central team that I'm part of, and my team started providing a lot of support through office hours, doing dojo sessions, brown bag. We introduced open space conference at our company, which was awesome. Thank you, Matt, and the company for suggesting it because it's been a hit since then. And then all slew of different automation framework tools for different types of testing. So I think we got the process, and we even got some of the evolution of the people, and our focus was really on testing. We really wanted to integrate testing earlier. We wanted to shift it left. And then we started seeing this light of this concept called single source of truth, that, hey, why do we still keep use case and rec specs? Why do we believe that they are the only place where we can go to get the requirements of the system? But this was probably a really, really tough pill to swallow. And here's why. As I said earlier, there was a lot of pride in documentation. People believed that everything documented in that huge stack of paper is important. And that's what we did for years and years, right? As BSA or business analyst, that's what you did. You documented requirements. So there was pride in the process and the work that you did. And it's how we've been doing it for years. How can we change something that we've done since we introduced web to our company? So it was a huge evolution change for them. The third one, which was always the argument that I got, was we're a financial company. We have regulations to meet. We got controls to meet. We can't be doing this. We can't use feature files as our requirements. Like, we're not going to meet the controls, and we're going to fail audit, right? And nobody ever questions that because it's like a given, like, oh yeah, we're regulatory. We can't do anything. So we had to break that down. Like, what does that mean? Like, what do we actually have to satisfy? Like, who determines what we need to satisfy, and what are the rules, and how can even this new form of document actually satisfy that, right? So I still remember talking to the BSAs and asking that question, And nobody could ever answer it because it was like, well, that's how we do it. Like, we have to do that. Like, they just said that we have to do this. And then I had to dig and dig and dig and meet with audit people, which is never fun, and get them to really tell me the story of what exactly is needed. And we got approval that, hey, this new type of requirement does meet the regulatory requirements. Again, it was a scary thing for these people. They've been doing this way of documenting requirements for years now. So it's a skill evolution. They're not used to doing example mapping. Like, that's a new technique. They're not used to writing given, when, then. So there was a skill evolution. And this was my favorite. No, you won't believe how many times people told me, well, shift left is about testing. Don't come in the requirement space. Like, you don't own that space. Like, you shouldn't be talking to us. Like, go do your testing thing, right? Evolve testing. And I said, no, it's not. It's really not. It's about evolving the entire software development, right? And that's how we're going to get to continuous delivery. So after getting through all of these and really understanding their perspective, and then saying, well, look, I appreciate and I value what you're saying, but we can still get all of that in this new way of doing it. Let's try. Let's have a couple of teams do it. Let's see if we get audited and what happens. And we talked to the audit people, made sure we laid the path to be successful for those teams. And once those teams were successful, everyone, business, IT, developers, BA, everyone's like, I don't know why we never did this, right? Like, now there's a single place. We just go to feature file. That's our single source of truth. Before, we had documents in 3 different places. Nothing was ever synced. When defects occurred in production, nobody ever relied on the documented test cases or requirements. Where did they go? They went to the code. They tried to figure out what the code's doing, because that's the only truth you had, right? Now you have truth in an English-like language that everyone can understand, and it's maintained. It's maintained real time, right? Anytime things change, business requirements change, code changes, you have validation. Those scripts break, and they tell you something went wrong. Get everything synced up again. So our dream is a reality now. At Vanguard, we are doing continuous delivery. Many, many teams that are still working in the monolithic application are still doing continuous integration with continuous testing and automated testing built into the pipeline, but they still have to wait months and months to actually release their product because it's a monolithic and everything has to be packaged together. But teams that can break away from the monolithic and build features into microservices, they can deploy on their own, they're independent, they're doing continuous delivery. They can go from a developer checking in a code to production in 10 minutes. But we can get better. There's always room for improvement. And here's our room for improvement. So we need to get better at given, when, then. So as I said, when I started this, I started with the developers, right? So developers jumped on it, and not only they were doing the code and the automated tests, but they were writing the feature files. So our feature files read like code, right? So that's a problem. So now we're really emphasizing, like, hey, you really need to work together. A tester, a BA, and developer, like, you need to write it together to make sure that it can be automatable and it's readable. So we're doing a lot of feature file workshops where teams are bringing in their written feature files to that workshop to say, okay, here's what we wrote. Tell us where we went wrong. Like, give us some tips on how to improve this. We had some misuse of Cucumber. So because we started with this propagation of Cucumber, do Cucumber, training Cucumber, everyone just thought you can't be doing continuous testing, you can't be doing shift left unless you're using Cucumber. So people started using it for everything, right? So technical requirements that didn't really need to read like business, and the business didn't really care about them, were written in Cucumbers. Systems where you could never do automation, they were written in Cucumber like COBOL. So then we had to re-educate, and we took the picture from the book with the iceberg to say, look, everything below the water is technical. You don't need to use Cucumber for that. We started getting a lot of complaints from developers like, JUnit is so much faster, this is such an overhead for me to, and I'm like, you don't need to use Cucumber. Don't use Cucumber where you shouldn't, right? The funding model. So as I said, we were delivery focused. We got a budget, and then you had to go implement, right? We wanted to change that mindset, so we're starting to change our funding model, how we get funded. We're starting to get into experimentation culture. I talked about how we're breaking away from monolithic app into making it more microservices, so it's more testable architecture, right, versus what we have right now. And we did have a problem with pyramid. We propagated pyramid saying, make sure that you build plenty of unit tests, a little bit of integration, and very little bit at the top, which is your end-to-end UI test. Well, people became so focused on that you would hear arguments in collaboration session where they would argue whether this test is an integration test or an end-to-end test. And how, if we make it into an integration test, it might actually throw off this whole 70, 20, 10 perfection that we got going in the pyramid. And so we realized that, and we said, look, that's not the point. You should never have perfect numbers, because if you do, you're probably doing something wrong. Right? The point was to just build a lot of unit tests, which give you a lot of confidence. They run fast. They're going to be easy to maintain. They're component-wise, so anytime you change that component, you get that feedback. Then a little bit of integration, and then a little bit of a UI end-to-end test. So we're getting better. We've de-emphasized pyramid. We've de-emphasized that metric so that people start focusing on the right things. And then these are just some voices from the clients, right? So teams that are doing this, we said, how's this going for you? Tell us what's worked for you. And ATDD or BDD, it's two different names for the same thing, is allow team to reduce their testing time significantly. I mean, from hours, weeks and months to hours, right? So that's a huge change. Another one that we heard was by following the shift left, we're able to actually do that extraction from monolithic app into a small service. Because then when they do that, it's more testable, it's more independent. And of course, it's improved communication. Before, there was a lot of silos, there were people figuring out their own things, and then when they at the end came together, there was a lot of misunderstanding, and it's removed that. So in the end, it was a great journey. And I really enjoyed my job. In fact, I love my job. I do this with a lot of passion. I think it's the best thing that we've done at Vanguard, and I can see that it's going to continue to be a success at our company. And I just wanted to do a shout out to Cucumber and Matt Wynn for all their support and all the coaches, and also giving me the opportunity to speak at the conference today. Thank you.
Take one question while can you put your laptop on? Does anyone have a question for Sheetal or for Narges? We can haul Narges back on stage if you demand it. This is your mic here, sir.
Thanks. When did you start this process? When did you start to turn left?
What was this? Sorry, can you repeat?
When did you start the process? When did you think about this the first time?
So probably 2015 is when we started running the first set of small pilots to see that, hey, this is going to be successful. Last year was when we broadened it and rolled it out across the enterprise and got everyone trained. And then this year is more about maturing and getting these practices right. And also last year we were very focused on net-centric development, so a lot of custom dev, Java, JavaScript, web UI. Now this year we're stepping into, well, what about host? There's a lot of logic that's happening in that space. How can we automate? We do a lot of third-party vendors, so bring systems off the shelf and integrate it with it. How do we do automation there? And we're stepping into mobile soon also. So.
Okay, I'm going to take one more. This chap at the back here had his hand up first. Here we go. Tim.
Thank you. Hi. You mentioned changes to the funding model that you were applying, and it sort of had a subnote of quality first. I was just wondering if you can tell us anything about that.
Yeah. So when I think about quality first, I'm just not thinking about that you don't have defects. I'm thinking about that you're building things that people actually want, right? So I think earlier we heard about hypothesis-driven development, lean concept, experimentation, and measuring that. So we're asking our business that don't give us a budget of $1 million and say, get all of these things done. Let's say, understand what problem do you have, and fund a team, a continuous team that is yours, and continue to use that team to get things out faster using our continuous delivery and do experimentation. So you think that this X is going to help Y, let's go prove that. And then we invest more money and build that feature out even more, versus building everything out and then only 20% of it is ever used. So instead of funding projects, we're saying fund teams.
Right. Sheetal, thank you very much. And thank you to Nagas as well. Round of applause. Thank you.